Usopp was originally supposed to be the vice captain of the crew. He came complete with a ceremonial hat, but also incomplete with a significantly lessened nose. And this was all back in the day when Zoro was supposed to be a member of Buggy's crew. So assumedly, Usopp would have been the first Straw Hat recruited. Now here's 55 more facts that you probably didn't know about Usopp. Usopp's original design was put to work in the form of his father Yasop, who Usopp greatly admires, even though they've never been shown interacting in the series. Although there is one moment in the non-canon film Red where they do recognize each other and form a link between Dream World and Real World. The film is worth watching just for that. Meanwhile, Usopp's name is almost certainly based on Isoppu, the Japanese pronunciation of Aesop. Also, Uso means lie in Japanese, so Usopp is a bit of a clever portmanteau. But does Usopp actually lie? Because almost every outrageous quote lie that Usopp has ever told has come true. Whether it's a giant goldfish fighting a dragon, or the gazillions of others that are detailed in this video about how Usopp has been completely spoiling One Piece ever since he was introduced. The general conclusion is that Usopp doesn't lie. If reality is inconsistent with what Usopp is saying, then reality rectifies its mistake. Still, Usopp's physical design is generally connected to Pinocchio. However, it could also be based on the Japanese Tengu, legendary creatures known for playing assorted tricks. Like this one pictured here doing I don't actually know. I guess maybe jacking off an elephant trunk? Doesn't matter. What matters is that Kinemon even once called Usopp a Tengu. Although in the Viz translation it was instead localized to long-nosed goblin, which I think sounds rather hurtful, and English Kinemon should apologize. Weirdly enough though, Usopp and Kinemon have a much deeper meta connection, and in fact Usopp foreshadows Kinemon about 3 years before he appears in the manga. In the Omake Ed Sullivan show, the crew were given a historical Japanese setting, where Usopp appears with Kinemon's hairstyle. Although his name in this Omake is Usokawa Goemon, because Usopp has all of the best names. And in fact, even the face made by Usopp after ingesting the Tata Babasco, even that has a name. It's called Hisatsu Ganmen Bikkuri Bakko, or Sure Kill Face Jack in the Box. However, in the Viz translation, it is called Special Facial Jack in the Box, which to me sounds more like an adult video title. Also, the face Usopp made is actually based on the entrance to the Goa Gajah Cave in Indonesia, which was revealed in Rurubu One Piece, a travel guide that charts all of Oda's real-world location inspirations, because there is so much about One Piece that goes underappreciated. Particularly Usopp himself, whose fame began when he appeared in the corner of Luffy's original bounty poster. And yeah, everyone knows that because Usopp made a big deal about it, but a lesser-known fact is that Usopp also appears in the bottom left-hand corner of Zoro's first bounty. You can see Usopp here doing his impression of Crocodile, whilst everyone is meant to be looking for the bomb. And if this Usopp sighting blew your mind brain, well, there might be a very good reason for that. Because in the anime, for whatever reason, Usopp was cut from Zoro's bounty. And I imagine that Toei are trying to deliberately sabotage the legend of Usopp because they also refuse to animate this. In the manga, it's revealed that Usopp has an entire theme park dedicated to him on Skypiea called Wagomu Land or Rubber Band Land, in honor of Usopp, of course, introducing rubber bands to the Skypieans. The park is run by Amazon, who seems to charge 30 million X-Tol for entry, and there's also this very muscular and very misspelled statue. This statuesque Usopp legacy also extends into real life though, because in front of Aso Station in Kumamoto, there is a life-size bronze Usopp statue gloriously greeting the daily commuters. Usopp's fame extends far beyond One Piece into real life and then circles back around again into other anime series, such as episode 11 of Assassination Classroom, when Shiro is seen reading Weekly Shonen Jump with Usopp on the cover. And this is based on a real Dressrosa era cover featuring Luffy, Zoro, and Usopp. So I guess without Sanji and forgetting about Robin and probably Frankie, Usopp gets promoted to Monster Trio status. But then again, it could be very well deserved, because other than the Monster Trio plus Jinbei, Usopp is the only confirmed member of the rest of the crew able to use Haki, which is pretty impressive. However, Oda has said that he intends to keep Usopp as the weakest member of the crew, and this is to keep him identifiable with the readers. He's our voice in the series. He is the one regular everyday dude, or the regular everyday dude with the very irregular nose. Funnily enough, due to his long nose, Kaku is often mistaken for Usopp, even by the Straw Hats. In fact, especially by the Straw Hats. And now, even as far as Egghead Island, Luffy is still mistaking Kaku for Usopp. And in case you yourself are confused, there is one surefire way to tell them apart. Oda revealed in the SBS of Volume 37 that Usopp's nose is slightly longer than Kaku's, due entirely to its rounded tip. With that said, Usopp's nose is only the 4th longest in the entire series. 3rd place is Katarina Devon, the silver medal goes to Arlong, and the longest nose in One Piece is currently held by the face of Vasco Shot. So the crazy thing about Vasco Shot is that he doesn't just have the length, he also has the the girth to back it up. However, I should note that Oda did leave out Tenguyama because his nose was just a mask. Much like how Usopp prefers to leave mushrooms out of his food. Mushrooms are Usopp's least favorite food because allegedly they made him sick once. However, in chapter 130, a certain Usopp claims that he has never been sick, along with Luffy and Sanji. But then again, I suppose Usopp could have just lied because that's what he does. This is far from the only Usopp-based blunder though, because get this right. In chapter 225, whilst fixing the Going Merry, Usopp hits his middle finger with a hammer. However, in the very next panel, it is Usopp's index finger that is shown to be hurt. And people call this peak fiction. Completely immersion breaking. And you know what? Since our immersion is broken anyway, apparently in the real world, Usopp would be from Africa. However, that's frustratingly non-specific, considering that there are 54 different countries within the continent of Africa. So you may as well just say that he'd be from Earth. However, Usopp's real-world profession would be a graphic designer. Skills he put to much-needed use fixing the Straw Hat Jolly Roger, which he did almost instantly. He definitely has the most artistic skill amongst the crew, which matches the artistic skill of his voice actor Kappa Yamaguchi, who was asked to draw Usopp and came up with a pretty amazing little sketch. In this interview, Kappa Yamaguchi also offered to show his panties, and yes, the word panties was specifically used. Kappa Yamaguchi is also a Rakugo actor, which inspired Oda to draw Usopp on Wano as a direct reference to the Rakugo play Toad Oil. And you know the toad itself also has quite a detailed backstory. The toad's name is Gama Pyonsuke, and they met one day when Gama decided to jump onto Usopp to escape from a very hungry snake. He then decided to stay with Usopp for safety. Back to Kappa Yamaguchi though, he has had a lot more influence on Usopp than you may know, because he's also the one that came up with Usopp's autographed Bartolomeo, which I have to say is one of the better ones, featuring a profile silhouetted Usopp. But he also came up with the notes for the Soga King theme song in the anime in collaboration with Oda, who wrote the lyrics. Speaking of Soga King, here is something pretty wild. In the anime, when the Pacifista were locking onto Usopp, they identified him as Soga King, even without the mask, which has to be a consistency error. I refuse to believe that anyone or any bot can look at these two pictures and see the same person. Although Usopp could have been a completely different person if he was a Devil Fruit user. Oda said that Usopp's ideal Devil Fruit would be the Poke Poke no Mi used by Blamenco, which allows the user to create seemingly infinitely deep pockets all over their body, which Usopp would use to hide an entire arsenal of wacky gadgets and I guess plants. But gadgets, ever so many gadgets. Because Usopp's mind is kind of like the Gear 5th of engineering. His inventions range from useful to ridiculous to a curious mixture of both, such as Skypia's Usopp which releases a grappling hook from Usopp's groin area. Although one of my favorite non-canon inventions is the Usopp Skyrider, which releases a pitifully small parachute from his posterior region, kind of like a small fart cloud. And you know what? I guess both would have had the same ultimate effect of doing nothing. But let's not forget his signature gear, and after this, I guarantee that you will never be allowed to forget it, because Usopp's Kurokabuto and accompanying satchel have been personified by Oda, and together they form a crime-fighting duo named Black and Gumma, with Gumma looking like a rather thick with so many C's lipped Rob Lucci. But you know what? We're forgetting Usopp's goggles. And you might notice that Usopp's goggles get an upgrade after Arlong Park and are suddenly different after entering the Grand Line. This is because he acquired a new pair in Logtown, which was even drafted in the manga. However, it was cut due to page limitations. Anime watchers may remember these events a bit differently though, because Usopp may not have met his father, but he did find himself a daddy, Daddy Masterson, who he challenged to a sniping duel, and after winning, Daddy's daughter Carol gave Usopp his trademark pre-time skip goggles. Speaking of the early days, that's very much one of Usopp's hobbies. Speaking of the early days, Usopp is the reason why many of the later crew members like Frankie, Brook, and Jinbei know so much about the early adventures. This is because Usopp will speak about them at great length even without being asked, in fact, especially without being asked. But to be fair, storytelling is his strength. There are very few things Usopp can do that outclasses the rest of the crew, but here is another one. Usopp is a super pro at becoming strident, which means to become loud, harsh, or grating. And as a volume 81 in the series, a fan that likely needs a wellness check counted how many times each of the crew had to become strident, and Usopp was counted to have become strident on 458 occasions, securing first place comfortably over Nami in second with a mere 295 times. But Usopp has no one to blame for his behavior except himself, and we can also blame him for this. Several inconsistencies with Luffy's character have been pointed out, specifically with his reactions to naked Nami twice during Alabasta. However, Oda's explanation for this is that Luffy is simply mimicking Usopp, thus making Usopp the bad influence. And although Usopp isn't as bad as Sanji and Brook, he does often share their behaviors. For example, when he found out that Brook's soul could leave his body, Usopp immediately thought of using that power to spy on women changing and got pretty pretty jealous. So while Franky, Brook, and Sanji are officially the pervert trio, if you look closely in the background, you'll see that Usopp makes this a pervert quartet. He's also very easy to prank, with Usopp being a common target for Luffy's pranks in particular, such as the extremely, and I mean extremely subtle gag in chapter 604 when Luffy picks his nose and wipes it on Usopp without him noticing, because Luffy and Usopp have that annoying brother dynamic. Which makes sense because Oda has once said that if the Straw Hats were a family, then Usopp would be the third son. However, in the Omake family time, Usopp was actually the mother named Usoe, a role which he played to perfection. Omake Usopps are definitely my favorite Usopps, with his best known role being the grand supervillain Dr. Usodabada in the Chopper Man series, which is a real spin-off manga that I love dearly. Usopp makes a solid contribution to that series, which, look, we can't always say. For example, in a hypothetical situation, Oda once drew the first 7 Straw Hats as if they'd been combined by Wapol, resulting in this, frankly, abomination where Usopp's contribution is simply his nose sticking out of the left arm. To be fair, this whole thing looks like some sort of nightmare alien which Oda himself is very familiar with. Oda was once contacted by a person claiming to be Usopp's father, Yasopp's best friend's brother's girlfriend, although they were later revealed to be an alien pretending to be a quote Earthlian, and later revealed to be a regular person just making all of this up. Oda's single word response to the situation was simply wow. A bit weird to be sure, but no weirder than Oda himself, who often actually consults his own fictional characters. For example, when he was coming up with the name Ben Beckman, allegedly Usopp suggested that he should be called Shofukute Nezumi because he looks like a rat. Good thing that Oda didn't listen to Usopp on that occasion, but it makes you wonder how many others he might have. Quite troubling because Usopp should not be trusted for story advice, not only because his lies have been spoiling One Piece, but also because he is the one Straw Hat who flat out asked Silvers Rayleigh to tell them what the One Piece was. The dude is a spoiler addict. He is worse than Reddit, and I do not say that lightly. Usopp is definitely much more useful than Reddit though, so much so that Usopp is commonly used as an actual object, such as when he became Zoro's sword, Hana Arashi, or Franky's right arm for pirate docking. In both cases, Usopp was quite literally the right-hand man, and that's because he's reliable, so reliable that Usopp is one of the crew's designated hairdressers alongside Sanji and Robin. And I reckon Usopp cut Zoro's hair because it's similar to gardening, which Usopp already does a lot of. He certainly should not be underestimated when it comes to fashion though. Usopp, unlike most crew members, actually dresses himself and has quite a decent sense of fashion, which gets shown off a lot in the films, in particular film Red, Gold, and Zed. His sense of fashion combined with his propensity to lie also makes him perfect for undercover operations. My favorite of which was when he pretended to be a world noble in film Gold, but also that time when he was Robin's manager during her brief stint as an exotic dancer. Usopp has even gone so far as to imagine what he would be like infiltrating as a world government agent, essentially adopting Lucci's attire with a comically oversized mask that calls back to Foxy's disguises. And his keen aesthetic skills may also explain how Usopp remains so in fashion in his good timeline future. However, there is a however, because in the bad timeline future, Usopp certainly does let himself go, repeating his 2-year time skip regime of gaining colossal amounts of weight and then losing it, but this time over a much slower period of 40 years. And during this time, he also continuously claims that Luffy is his underling, pretending to be the captain like always. But then again, Usopp is one of the 3 Straw Hats to have actually captained a crew alongside Jinbei and of course Luffy, although Usopp's experience is probably the least impressive on paper. But the biggest Usopp question is, if you've ever desperately wondered, for whatever reason, what Usopp smells like, the answer is apparently gunpowder. And that's 56 facts about Usopp that you may or may not have known.